Kia ora. I usually am coming to you to play some music, to sing music to you, to talk about musical things. But today I'm doing something slightly different, and that is to tell you about some books I wrote. So I had a story years ago that came into my head, and over a long period of time sort of started to add to it, and then 13 years later I wrote this, To Hold the Moon, a book that's essentially about ships and swords. It's the idea of taking all the things I like about fantasy and science fiction and kind of shoving them into one book. So, you know, ships and swords, and it's a very me book. But it follows the journey of a character named Captan Praed. Captan Praed is a character, and everything revolves around this character, and he's an awesome guy. He has been given kind of an impossible task by an emperor, and the emperor is saying that you've got to get this thing done. First half of the book is him trying to piece together a crew that will sail with him. What I wanted to do was to read you a little bit of this. I want to read to you a couple of chapters so that you've got them in some way. After writing that, it took me 13 years to write this, I then wrote this one, Dark Princess, and it's a different colour. And this one is the continuing story of this one. I'm currently halfway through writing the third one, currently called Empire of One. We'll see if that stays. It's a story that I've really enjoyed writing, and I've got some people who really supported it, so I want to kind of thank you and acknowledge that if you've been a supporter. If you've bought it, you know, that's awesome. If you've just told me it's great, that's awesome. If you've said, hey look, we're really keen for you, it's not really my kind of thing, that doesn't matter. I'm also really happy as well. But I'm going to take the opportunity to read the first few chapters of this. If you hear it and you're like, oh yeah, it's legit, then you can ask me and we can talk about getting you a copy. Don't have many copies left, but always able to print them. That's really easy to do. One final thing about this is that I've always said, and this is what I've got from the feedback from people, if you get to the end of chapter 3 on this, being like, oh, I'm not really feeling it, you're not going to get it any after that, so you're absolved of reading any further. To Hold the Moon. Let me read you a story. The first chapter is called The Boy Prophet and Other Things. The only problem with being a hero is that while most folk think a hero's life is lots of swordplay and receiving praises from monarchs and maidens alike, it is usually a much more lonely existence of alienation and danger. It is scarcely the occupation that most people think it is. The Captain Praed knew this all too well. Not only did he enjoy the great misfortune of being a hero of vast repute, he also bore the ill-fated title of Boy Prophet, which had been with him since he was a boy, and had given him not a moment's rest since he first slew Tyloch, the champion of the hated Levir, the enemy race that bordered Praed's nation of Mediancourt. Since that day, if he was not fighting the Levir in battle or being heralded by many as he went from city to city, he was running from the jealous intentions of his emperor, the Emperor Anari. Anari had begun his rule as Mediancourt's first emperor in a well-meaning, peaceful way. He sought to do good, to fight the Levir and rule with a good heart. But he soured along the way and let all kinds of distractions take his mind away from his original intentions. When he first felt the pangs of jealousy at the boy prophet's growing reputation, instead of putting aside such futile feelings, he savoured them, and they grew in his heart alongside all of the other ills he matured. As Anari began to fall, Praed began to rise. Anari was still the emperor, but he had begun to slide down a slippery slope, and the rumours of his state of mind began to persist. Praed, however, rose from rank to rank, till he eventually became a captain, just one rank below a general in the Mediancourt military. Anari sought to have him killed, and that drove Praed far, far away. Thus Praed disappeared for a time, which only allowed other hates in Anari's mind to rise to the surface. Praed was found years later fighting the Levir in the borderlands, and he was asked, at Anari's request, to return home. All was forgiven. Praed received a hero's welcome, and he was married to Anari's daughter, Maithia. But Anari had other plans for his captain. He sent him away to fight on his wedding day, no less, to try and weaken the bond he might form with the Princess Maithia. Then, upon his return, Anari summoned Praed to him with an important undertaking. For years, the Britannis, the rulers that had presided over the land before the Empire, had sought to reach the distant land of Manon, which lay over the Black Sea. For them, it stood as a prize, the finding of the undiscovered country. They had begun to plan this great task, for the Black Sea is not easily crossed and they had no vessels that could make such a journey. But it took such a time that those who began it were long dead by the time the Midiantori were able to do it. That time was now, and Anari sought the Captan Praed, Midiantori's greatest hero, to do this. You see, Anari was really thinking, if I send the boy prophet and he fails, he will be out of my way for good. But if he succeeds, I will receive the glory, for he will do it in my name. Praed accepted the task and then left the emperor pondering for what he should do. Anari had ordered that they should leave to cross the Black Sea for Mainon in just 5 days' time, for Anari would celebrate his 10th anniversary as emperor on that day, and the tides of the Black Sea would not allow for another sailing for another 4 weeks after that. Anari also furnished Praed with a list of names of those who had been trained to sail to the undiscovered country. Praed then left carrying this paper and went back to the makeshift quarters he was staying in until he was allowed by his emperor to return to his new wife. That is me reading the first chapter of To Hold the Moon, my book, and if you would like to hear more, I'm going to do the second chapter, and that will be in the next video, so yeah, listen to that. If you don't want to hear more, then don't.